Hello, and welcome back to another episode of VTS Presents Community Cafe. I'm your host, Datta Khalsa. I have two guests this evening, the first being Rick Longinotti. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome, thank you.
And I understand that you're on the steering committee for stopping the recall effort for our council members Drew Glover and Chris Crone.
In the city of Santa Cruz, right?
And the city of Santa Cruz.
No, within the city.
Within the city.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we're not trying to recall the city of Santa Cruz. So I guess if you can walk our viewers through how you got involved and what your position is on this.
Yeah. Well, this is one of those efforts that I really didn't set out to choose, but it was sort of chosen, and I felt like I needed to respond because I feel like a recall should be a tool that's reserved to remove public officials when they commit serious wrongdoing. And I knew that that wasn't the case here. The recalls grew out of the effort last year, in 2018, it defeated the rent control measure in Santa Cruz. It went down to sound defeat. And with the money left over from that and additional funds went into gathering signatures to recall two of the council members who had supported rent control. So in my opinion, even if you're against rent control, that's not a way to go. You have every 4 years, you have an election to elect the people you want. It's to use a recall for just removing your political opponents, I think sets a bad precedent. So
your position is that the recall effort is solely because of their position on rent control, or because I believe that the reasons that they're at least publicly being said that the recall is happening are different. There's accusations of improper conduct during council meetings, that sort of thing. So do you want to maybe speak to what the official reasons are and maybe address why those aren't valid reasons?
Sure, yeah, I'd be glad to. The reason I mentioned the anti-rent control effort is because that's the money. If you follow the money, over $100,000 was spent to gather signatures, and it was from the group that defeated the rent control. So the issues that were brought forward, one was misconduct regarding their colleagues and staff members at City Hall. So
specifically what?
Well, at one meeting in last February, the mayor said that some people that she'd talked to thought that she was being bullied by these two men on the council. And that the city staff, after they heard her say that, they launched an investigation. And there were other people that came forward who were accusing both Drew Glover and Chris Crone of misconduct. So the investigation was done by an attorney name of Rose. So the Rose report was issued.
And Rose was hired by the city?
Hired by the city, yeah.
Okay.
It cost $18,000. So the Rose investigation examined pretty thoroughly all these allegations, and they came up with, there were two allegations that they substantiated, one against Chris Crone and one against Drew Glover. The one against Glover was that he got angry unnecessarily with a fellow council member over the use of a conference room when she overstayed her time in a conference room. And the allegation against Chris Crone was that he laughed during a staff presentation. He uttered some kind of a laugh when the staff member was presenting to the council.
During a meeting?
During a
public council meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
They called it a laugh or a snort or something.
A guffaw?
Right.
I don't know.
Some kind of noise.
Okay.
At any rate, those two issues, disrespectful, certainly. A reason to remove somebody from office? No, not nearly meeting the criteria.
So, there's been word of other things such as walking out of meetings, that sort of thing. Those weren't part of the official reason for the recall?
Well, so the recall campaign, those folks who want to recall the council members have a laundry list of their complaints about, and one of those was that they walked out of a meeting. Those are, I think that, when you're trying to recall somebody and you don't have serious misconduct to point to, then what do? You've got to say something. And the rent control issue is actually moot because the state of California passed rent control, went into effect January 1st. So we have rent control and just cause eviction. So that's not really an issue anymore. So this whole thing, I think, has been unnecessary, and I think it's brought our politics to a new low. I've been around here since, for 30 years, and I've never seen a city council race get so ugly. Usually, when there's several people running for 3 open seats or 4 open seats on a city council, they don't tear each other down. They just say how great they are. You know, that's the way that people campaign here. Sometimes in a one-on-one supervisor race, you hear more of that sort of tearing down the opponent. But I think this has gotten ugly, and you know, in my life, I'm involved with a group called Nonviolent Communication Santa Cruz. This doesn't meet the standards of nonviolent communication.
Not quite an NVC.
No, it's not. And you know, the most disappointing thing about the recall campaign to me is when the mailer had gone out to presumably all Santa Cruz voters, saying that there was proven that these council members harassed women at City Hall. Well, as I mentioned, disrespect on 2 occasions. And that doesn't constitute harassment in anybody's definition that I know of, let alone the city's definition of harassment in the workplace. So a deliberate attempt to, I think, malign their character, which really bothers me, and I think we all need to speak up about that.
I guess 2 questions come to mind. First, you must have a website or some source people can look to for your position?
stoptherecalls.org.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for asking.
And being a practitioner of nonviolent communication, what would your alternative solution, what would you propose?
Well, you know, it's interesting because the city council did get a prescription from 2 people. One was this Rose report, and the Rose report came up with the main recommendations. The first one was the city council members need to talk to each other. They need to have mediation. And that may have been a remedy early on, you know, when this first allegations of the mayor came out. But, you know, that's water under the bridge. But at this point, they are doing mediation. They're having mediate sessions, so I'm hopeful for that. They also had, I don't know if you recall, so a year ago when the new city council, this is after the rent control was defeated, the new city council proposed a just cause eviction measure in January. There was a storm of protest, and the council backed away from that. They voted that they were going to table that. Meanwhile, they were looking into a committee of stakeholders, landlords, tenants, to get together with a mediation team from out of Sacramento, the Center for Collaborative Policy. And
that sounds like a good idea.
That seemed like a good idea. The guy, Dave Sepos from that center, came to the council in June and said, a couple things are going to kill this effort. One is that the council hasn't, basically too much dissension, infighting on the council. And the second thing is this recall. And so he said, I don't see a successful outcome of this collaborative effort with those things going on. And sure enough, that's what we got.
So it's interesting because on a national level, we're dealing with a much larger recall effort. For what it's worth, do you see some parallels between these two in terms of a trend in politics?
Well, I think that the parallel is, when there's economic well-being at stake, I think that things get pretty bare-knuckled, right? I mean, I think in the rent control election, a lot of fairly small landlords, not big corporations, but fairly small-time landlords felt threatened. This is their retirement. This is their main source of their income. I'm a landlord. It's the main source of my income. So I can get that it felt threatening. And yet, in spite of that threat, we need to figure out ways to talk to each other because we've certainly, in the 30 years I've been here, I've seen people have to move out of the county because of the high rents and the people that are staying under really stressful conditions, as I'm sure you've seen too.
So with regard to the actual issues, the findings of the Rose Report, was the recommendation of the Rose Report in favor of a recall vote being put before the people?
No, the Rose Report simply made some recommendations about the council members being trained about policy when they first get into office, the council getting together for mediation. Let's see, what else? There was no recommendation for recall, certainly, and no recommendation for punishment in the way that we consider that.
So that was more the result of the petition and signatures being gathered.
Yeah,
which was an independent effort.
I think it was an opportunity. I think there was an economic issue at stake, and I think the opportunity presented itself to like, whoa, there's problems at City Hall, so let's turn that into part of the campaign.
So next month we're going to do a panel with proponents and opponents.
Yeah.
Are you planning to attend that of this?
It sounds interesting. I
Okay.
would look for it. Yeah.
We'll see about that. Anything else you'd like to add?
I think needs to be a reconciliation process. Whatever happens on March 3rd, I think people need to get together. And I'm talking to the people in my circles about, we really got to get away from the us versus them thinking. I hold myself responsible for contributing to that in the past and contributing just by silence, right? When people have that sort of us versus them thinking and you don't say anything like, well, wait a minute, these are our neighbors you're talking about.
So what's your relationship to Crone and Glover? I mean, prior to this?
I didn't really know them before they got into office.
Okay.
But I kind of stepped forward to try to help, as they became accused of these things.
Did they express, was it either expressing some remorse or that they had done things differently, or was it that they feel, pretty justified in what they did? I mean, what's their, by your assessment, what's their overall response been?
Of course, I can't speak for them, but
by your assessment, though.
Yeah, I mean, one of them, Chris Crone, attended one of my workshops, which was on nonviolent communication. I think he's made an effort to try to see his responsibility. As I mentioned, I feel partly responsible too. It's just, this didn't grow up out of nothing. We're in a community where there are a lot of conflicts that have been going on for years. And to the extent that we've contributed to that conflict, I think we all need to look at ourselves and what can we do differently.
And Drew Glover?
Drew, my just noticing from a distance, I'm noticing that he's making an effort, and his being steeped into the Dr. Martin Luther King's theories and all that. I think he's trying to practice. I think we're all doing our best, and we need to support each other to make sure that best is good enough.
All right. Well, thank you for expressing
You're
your views and joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate having you on the show. Persephone's Dream is a romantic comedy presented by Santa Cruz local artists Frogman and E.T. Join them to enjoy a fusion of wit, humor, musical expression, seasonal festivities, and theatrical fun, all collected into one spectacular production showcasing the various talents of local artists and performers in the Santa Cruz community.
What can we do for the coming of spring?
Great question.
And our birthdays.
Our birthdays.
Our birthdays.
Our birthdays are coming.
We have to do something just so spectacular.
Yes.
Frogman and E.T. are multifaceted artists with roots in the Santa Cruz area. They perform locally and internationally with the intention of spreading love and healing through original art, music, dance, theater, and storytelling. Their interactive theatrical performances feature talented local artists and performers from the community. Interweaving of classical and modern themes empowers the audience by invoking love within the spirit and reminding viewers about self-care and actualization. Performances are created to engage and entertain all ages, to inspire the youth, and positively impact the community.
You're a Pisces?
I'm a Pisces. Wow.
Whoa.
Whoa.
This is trippy.
Synchronicity.
Synchronicities abound.
Frogman and E.T. invite you and your family to come celebrate the dawn of spring with them and the triumph of light over darkness. March 19th at 8 p.m., DNA's Comedy Lab. Welcome back to our next segment. Our featured guest on this episode is Becky Steinbruner, candidate for 2nd District Supervisor. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I understand this is not your first time running for this position, right?
That's correct. I ran in 2016 as well. I did not campaign at all, but still got nearly 20% of the votes.
And for point of reference, the winning candidate received how many?
Oh, well, he received the majority of the votes.
Roughly 80%?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. There was one other candidate, but he received very few votes.
So on a local election, how many, as a percentage of total voters, how many voters typically turn out for this kind of a, say, a midterm election?
Well, I expect it to be very high this year because of the presidential primary election. So Santa Cruz County has a very good reputation for voting, especially in these important elections. So I'm expecting a good turnout.
Okay. And, the platform of most challengers is, asking, are things better off now than they were at the beginning of the term. So how would you characterize the change in District 2, with regard to some of the main, and we can touch on some of the main issues facing the district now?
Well, the incumbent has been there in office since 2012. Many people feel that the public process for deciding major issues and policy changes in the county has been woeful. Disregarding the public in general. There are public meetings, but the outcome does not reflect at all what the people have said they cared about or were concerned about. I have attended pretty much every single Board of Supervisor meeting since for the last 4 years, and I have seen many people come hoping to get some resolution, hoping to get some answers, and are completely dismissed.
So what have been, give maybe one or two of the main misses in your, examples in your opinion of what was incorrectly decided upon or not done?
Well, I will focus at this moment on the lack of funding for county fire department. That is the volunteer, very well-trained county volunteer fire people, those in the community that are there to protect us when CAL FIRE is gone to other major things. CAL FIRE does bring in other units from outside of the state or other areas of the state, but they do not have the local knowledge that is necessary to defend and protect the people in times of disaster here. So the volunteers are the heart and soul of our community. They train with CAL FIRE, they train with the professionals, they're excellent people.
And how are they funded?
But they are not funded.
At all?
Well, they are funded only with what's called a county service area, CSA 48, and that is a property tax imposed upon all rural property in the state responsibility area. So we are also, all of us, paying CAL FIRE to protect that area, but then on top of that, the property owners in county service area CSA 48 pay an additional tax. That has been about $150 per parcel. Now, the state has a permanent half-cent sales tax. It's called Proposition 172 that was passed in 1992 by the voters to better fund public safety when there were budgetary problems at the state and the state took the money away from the public service counties funding and gave it to education. So in 1992, the voters overwhelmingly passed Prop 172 that instilled a permanent half-cent sales tax statewide to specifically fund public safety in all counties. They left it up to each county to decide how they divided it between law enforcement and fire protection. Santa Cruz County gives zero of the 172 money that comes in every year and will come in every year.
And that's on the Board of Supervisors?
That is on the Board of Supervisors. Last year they got $18 million and gave zero to county fire. Zero to fund our county's fire protection. That's wrong. What they did instead was two things. In November of 2018, they put forth a half-cent countywide sales tax that said it would fund fire, among other things, and the people voted for that. And that was in November when half of Northern California was on fire. Zero of Measure G, this new half-cent countywide sales tax, zero is going to fund county fire.
Out of 18 million?
That's about 5 million.
Okay.
For the half-cent half-cent sales tax countywide. That and the statewide half-cent sales tax that is $18 million. Instead, what they did, they just passed a new tax on top of what people are already paying. It was called the County Service Area 48 Benefit Assessment Tax. And that was a weighted vote. They paid out of County Fire's budget. They took $158,000 to fund this exercise. They hired a consultant from Sacramento to push it through. It was a weighted vote, so those whose assessments are higher, and we're talking thousands of dollars here, their vote counted for more than the lowly property owner whose assessment is lower.
So has there been a groundswell? Because typically representatives look to their constituents for
They should.
for guidance.
So they should.
And I think the big thing on most constituents' minds has been homelessness, which is obviously handled more under, not that it should be, but the police end up being the de facto
Yes.
caregivers or the first line of addressing those issues. So what
Yeah.
would you say to people's perception, perhaps, that that's been more important, and maybe now that they've had examples of the fires in Northern California and Australia most recently, is this something that they, if they have concerns, could say, okay, we're not as concerned as we were before in light of these other concerns about fire safety? I mean, what would you say to them?
So are you saying that the general public concern about homelessness merits the full payment of the 172 money to law enforcement? Because that's what's happening. Law enforcement gets a lot of funding.
Mm-hmm.
They get all of the 18 million. They also have a county service area 38 property tax that funds them. They also get money from the general fund. County Fire gets 0 from the general fund. And they also are getting the bulk of the Measure G, half-cent countywide sales tax. So it's like a bottomless pit. You can always have a list of things you would love for a new program funded by Measure G. The law enforcement got 2 brand new cars, 6 brand new officers. And it is a good program, the focused intervention team. But how can you justify giving zero
To the volunteers.
for fire protection, which is paramount to protecting public health and safety, as elected officials must do following the California Constitution mandate?
So if you can help our viewers better recognize the local branches of the volunteers, the one that comes to mind most quickly is the Bonnie Doon Volunteer Fire Department.
Yes.
They're the most visible, but how many fire departments are there, volunteer fire departments?
Well, there are certainly the volunteers in Bonnie Doon. There's a unit up at Loma Prieta on the summit, the South Skyline up on the summit, and Corralitos.
So it tends to focus on the outlying areas where really,
The
first
rural
responders,
areas.
first responders
Yes.
are best people on site. So what do they do? Do they have chainsaws? Do they have tractors? Do they have
They have
trucks?
engines.
Engines.
They have very well equipped fire engines. They have medical response things. They are trained in medical response. They are just as qualified as are the professional CAL FIRE people that respond.
And
they
what are they?
Excellent people.
So what are they lacking that more funds could help with?
They are lacking better training, more training opportunities, and better equipment. Loma Prieta had to do their own fundraising to buy their own new water tender a few years ago because the county refused to fund it. That's wrong. That the people have to do their own fundraising to buy a water tender to support fire protection.
Okay.
It's wrong.
So jumping around to other issues, one that caught my eye was you've stated that you would be in favor of cutting the salaries for the Board of Supervisors. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yes, I would cut my own salary by 30 to 40%. You can go on Transparent California and see what any government worker is making, and I think that it would be a symbolic action to reduce my own salary and ask. I'm not going to demand that others do, but I would ask that they follow suit, because this county is looking at a tsunami of debt next year due to the unfunded county pensions. That's what was behind the sales tax, Measure G. The CAO, Carlos Palacio, told the board they had to have that half-cent sales tax. They had to have that because of the debt coming our way in 2021. Even with Measure G now, it is still anticipated to be $6 to $9 million debt. If there's a bit of a downturn in the economy, we are looking at $12 million deficit in this county. reducing my salary would be a statement of importance to this and my willingness to sacrifice to help the county's overall good.
So what's, with statements like that, how does that go over with the other supervisors?
Well, I haven't discussed it with them. I'm sure it would not be popular, but the reaction at last week's Cabrillo College candidate forum, when I discussed that, immediately the two incumbents said it would not be fair to reduce the pensions of those who are only going to get about $30,000 a year. Those are not the people I'm talking about. Those are the SEIU union people that are the worker bees. The people I'm talking about are the top level management who have had very lucrative agreements made such that they are making $300,000, $400,000 a year. And some of those, such as Susan Moriello, the county administrative officer who retired, is making nearly 99% of the same amount of money as she did when she was working.
As a pension?
Okay. Yes, as pension and medical benefits. And that's wrong. It's not sustainable for the people. Right now, for every 6 people working in county government, 1 is retired. It is anticipated in 15 years it will be 1 for 1. How can the people afford that? It's not going to work. So there is this tsunami of debt coming in 2021 because of the miscalculation of funding on the part of the state. And so they're coming after all of the agencies. It won't be just the county government. It will be the city, it will be the fire departments, it will be the schools. We're all looking at this big, big debt coming due next year.
Okay, well, we have about 5 minutes to go. Any other main issues you'd like to touch on? The rail trail, for example, or?
That's a popular one.
Okay.
And transportation, in talking with my constituents, I have been holding informal constituent meetings at different coffee shops throughout the 2nd District, and it's fascinating to learn about what people are concerned with. Paramount is the transportation. We're all really sick of the gridlock on Highway 1, especially for the 2nd District constituents. So I do think the rail trail has to get going. I am so sick of study after study. I mean, with nothing being done, nothing being done virtually to give people relief and to give them another choice. And that's what people need. Yeah. We need choices. And so I would work very hard to get just something done, to get a pathway of cheap compacted road base that would support bicyclists, walkers, strollers, and possibly even golf carts, electric carts. But there needs to be some relief for the people coming from Watsonville to come up to their work, their school, and there's no reason why we can't get it done. It doesn't have to be perfect. In Minnesota, a group of Girl Scouts put in a trail. How hard can it be? Do we really have to do yet another $1 million study to see about alternates for the corridor? And that's what the Regional Transportation Commission has decided to do. That has to stop. Okay. I'm in favor of a train, and I'm looking forward to the pilot of the hydrogen fuel cell passenger train coming in October.
That's exciting. So just to wrap things up,
thank you.
If you were to win in November, how would you work with the other supervisors to affect change?
Well,
because you all have to get along at the end of the day.
We have to get along. We don't have to agree, but we can have discussion. And what I see lacking in the Board of Supervisors right now is that public discussion. I, again, have been to every single board meeting for the last 4 years, and I rarely see discussion. It's almost all votes are unanimous. And sometimes when one does go against the flow, like Supervisor Caput from the 4th District, he's castigated publicly. That's wrong. These people are supposed to be discussing things, supposed to be taking into consideration the concerns that the people who take the time out of their day to come to these Tuesday morning meetings, to at least involve them and to bring what they have said into the discussion. That is absent. And it isn't how it used to be. I used to go to board meetings in the 80s. It was much different.
So we're
And so I
looking
would
forward to that.
encourage discussion, respectful discussion, and we would get things done.
Well, thank you. Good luck in your efforts. And,
Thank you.
Appreciate you joining our show.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. And thank you for joining us as well. We know you wouldn't be here if you didn't care.